Welcome back to the Glassix Spotlight, where today we have the honor of speaking with a true expert in transforming customer and employee experiences into lasting legacies, Aileen Day. Aileen is a powerhouse in the world of CX, EX, and HX human experience, using her unique blend of skills as a certified customer experience professional, psychotherapist, and business advisor to help companies not just meet expectations, but exceed them in ways that build trust, loyalty, and brand value. Her approach to CEHX is nothing short of groundbreaking, showing businesses how to create experiences that resonate deeply with both their customers and employees. As the founder of the value driven brand and Island Day Advisory, Eileen has spent over 20 years helping organizations across various industries from retail to corporate unlock the true potential of their customer and employee relationships. Her work goes beyond strategy. It's about making sure businesses are designed to succeed by putting human experience at the heart of everything they do. With her trademark no BS approach, Eileen has redefined how companies think about customer and employee loyalty, and she's here to share the insights, strategies, and real-world stories that have helped her build trusted and value-driven brands. Eileen, we're thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. What an introduction.
Yeah, well, trying my best here. Um,
Succeeding excellently.
well, Eileen, before we dive in, is there anything exciting happening in your world lately that you'd love to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I actually met with some potential stakeholders today. One of my big, hairy, audacious goals is to integrate the learnings and skills of customer experience, the disciplines of customer experience into tertiary and secondary education here in Australia. And I've had my second meeting with some stakeholders that are in a position to help me make that a reality. So that's a really exciting venture that we're going on at the moment, and it's nice to know that it's a wheelbarrow that I'm able to push confidently and with credibility, and perhaps even change the landscape of customer experience management and the way we do business in the future.
Wow, that sounds promising.
I
And
hope so.
for our listeners, today's episode called Building Trust with CEHX, Ellen Day on Elevating Human Experience in Business. Before we jump right in, I have to say we usually cover the topic of customer experience and touches a little bit sometimes on the employee experience, but we're not much touching of the human experience. And I think that's where CEHX gels in. Eileen, you're known for your expertise in customer, employee, and human experience. Can you explain what CEHX is and what makes it so critical for building trusted, value driven brands? And obviously, how businesses can start applying it today?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started really kind of honing into performing customer experience advisory work, probably around the same time as the spicy cough hit the world, I was working through some books and resources and whatnot, and I kept seeing this uh, reference to CEX, which sounds controversial, but it's pronounced sex. And it was excellent because it was something that was definitely needed in the sense of we need to really understand as leaders in business, as employees, as employers, that to have a successful customer experience that creates value and drives loyalty to our brand, we also need to start with a successful employee experience. And so the thing was, though, that at that time I was thinking, okay, but to me, that feels like there's something missing in this equation. And about 12 months earlier, I had been invited to speak at a fireside chat for our TEDx Casey here in Melbourne. And in that, I talked about experiencing human. and the reality of what it really means to be a human in life, in business, the emotions that are attached to that, the realities and goals that are attached to that, and how we can do it better. And I really kind of thought this is a real serendipitous moment. I feel like we need to, in business, in customer experience, really kind of go back to the basics and really understand that we, in every single instance, are working to create satisfaction and loyalty from a human. And I think so often, not just here in Australia, but in business worldwide, we treat people too often, not always, but too often like they're a number or like they're the bottom line, or they're not the human beings that they should be treated as. And so my goal then became to really, as I talk about proliferating this term, CEHX, and I call it, and you can tell I didn't make it up, I just added a letter, the joy of sex. And I kind of talk to people and say, when you strategically implement, uh, work in your organization that works towards improving your customer, your employee experience, the best component you can have is understanding that those two pillars are made up of humans. And so, therefore, applying and designing the way you do business to the human experience.
Love that. And I want to talk a little bit about your website. As a marketer, one of the very first thing I do before I jump on an episode with one of our guests is to go over to their website. Most of them have websites just like you. Um, and I really like the narrative. I mean, your website talks a lot about turning businesses into brands and brands into legacies. And from my standpoint, that's just brilliant. I just say that's something that everyone would want eventually. Can you share a story of how you've helped the company make that exact transition through CEHX?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about being a brand as opposed to being a business is that you become a brand when consistently there is a feeling, hopefully a positive feeling, that you imprint on the people who purchase, who buy from you. And and use your services, use your products, refer your services, refer your products. That is the point in which you are no longer just a business, but you are becoming a value driven brand. And value, not just necessarily in the monetary format, but value as in you have created something of value to the humans that you serve and look after. And so that value intrinsically creates loyalty, right? If we value something, we hold it quite dear. And that at that point, we then start to find ways that we can share that value with other people. So we do things like tell people all about our experience. We become promoters of that brand, not just a business anymore, because we've left the customer with a certain, feeling that they can't necessarily replicate in any other circumstance in their life. And so, for example, working with a home builder who initially wanted to put themselves out as a sustainable, green eco home builder, but they weren't necessarily performing the strategies and the tactics that would help them put themselves out into the market in that manner with integrity. And so, what we had to do was we really had to kind of take a really hard look in the mirror, strip back a lot of uh, you know, the fanfare and the marketing, and really question at the core what value were we going to add to the process of building a home that would allow ourselves to actually position ourselves as an eco-friendly home builder. And what value does that actually bring to the feeling of their customers, right? And so for customers who are really, concerned or wanting that type of home built for them, someone that looks and cares for the environment, cares about their carbon footprint, and all of that stuff, it really meant for this business redesigning the way they built homes, because what they said they wanted to do and what they were actually doing at that point were a little bit too different. And so it meant that they had to invest in different processes, systems. It meant that they had to put some more checks and balances, more quality assurance, and change aspects of the way that they did business. But they no longer, after a period of time and being able to consistently apply those promises to their customers, they were able to provide customers with trust, right? So they built this level of trust with their customers that those customers had a feeling that couldn't be replicated, and they became a brand. And in that brand, they were able to show with evidence consistently that they were the go-to builder for people who had, a higher care level for the environment that they lived within.
I love that. And thank you so much for the example from this particular space. I was like praying, please, no more ecom or whatever
Ah,
example. Yeah, but for our listeners, I'll say it once again, Eileen's reside in Australia, where this particular industry is thriving in a way that, it touches a lot of the population in Australia, and home design, builders, renovations, and I think it's a very unique example. Thank you for sharing.
no, my pleasure. I'll tell you what, I actually don't have any e-com clients, to be honest, as I think about it.
That is a surprise.
Yeah, it's a surprise. I mean, I wouldn't say no, but yeah, no, I actually don't have any.
Well, maybe after that
You
conversation,
never
you'll
know.
exactly. No, but I was just like referring to the fact that the majority of our guests will say something from the e-com world or retail
Yeah,
world, which is a bit more common. But yeah, I love that. I love that industry in
I
particular.
like to
But
be different.
yeah, well, that's part of it. Um, Well, Eileen, with your background as both a clinical hypnotherapist and psychotherapist, how do you bring that unique skill set into advising businesses and improving their CX and EX?
Yeah, it's become a really interesting uh, skill to add to my um, a feather to add to my cap, we might say, in the sense of I do a fair bit of executive mentoring and helping, C-suite leaders and business owners in helping them drive their business scale, into bigger markets and whatnot. But there tends to be this, I'm going to say, glass ceiling or brick wall that they find themselves running into and hitting their heads on. And a lot of the time, when we break down what's happening, it tends to be, areas of their own limiting self beliefs or issues or experiences that they have come up against in their past, where those past experiences are now driving, expectations or anxieties into the future, and perhaps not helping them in the healthiest of ways. And so a lot of the reason I actually went and got qualified as a clinical psychotherapist was because, as one of my service offers is called the Momentum Business Amplifier. It's a 12-month group coaching program for small business owners here in Australia. And I kept finding that a lot of the times I would challenge my members to push themselves or do something different, or just get out of their comfort zone, and they would, in instances, figuratively fall to pieces. And it got to the point where I was only able to give so much advice, and without, I guess, being fearful of crossing the line of, is this advice helpful, or do I really know what I'm talking about? And it got to the point where the opportunity to get my qualification and register as a clinical hypnotherapist. So, a clinical hypnotherapist tends to work on clinical issues, so things like depression, anxiety, self belief issues, self esteem, motivation, all of that type of stuff, as opposed to making you cluck like a chicken, which no one can do unless you really want to. But the psychotherapy component of that is the ability to know what to say, how to say it, when to say it, and, when to stop and listen and when to speak up. And it's been such an impactful piece to my service offering, and being able to watch people who didn't believe in themselves, or didn't think they could implement processes or boundaries, or help their team in their own employee experience because of other issues they might have faced in the past, just get out of their own way and make magic happen. Has been one of the most exceptional benefits to having that skill set.
I'm so curious to know, just out of curiosity, of course, before we jump into our next question here, but are you finding yourself lately working mostly with clients within your territory, or you're also serving clients nationwide in Australia?
Um, it's probably a bit of an 80-20 situation at the moment. So 80% are based in Victoria, and then 20% are based between Queensland and New South Wales.
All right, that's cool. What about international clients? You had a chance to experience that as well, or not just yet?
Yeah, no, I've had a couple of clients from Southeast Asia and the US, but I would also say that I am generally not for everyone, in the sense of I'm not very, um, my my as you said in the introduction, I'm pretty no bullshit, and not everyone wants that, and that's completely fine. But when you are the person that wants that, we tend to have an excellent relationship no matter what part of the world you're in. But it's not for everyone, and I can absolutely respect, and I think it's a really wonderful way for me personally to make sure that I get the right customers for my business as well, because sometimes I can be a bit controversial, and sometimes I can be outspoken or a little bit left of center. And people who watch that or tune into that and go, yeah, actually that's the kind of person I want to work with, then they absolutely know what they're coming in for. And others see that and they might be like, oh, she said the joy of sex, that's not for us. And I go, well, that's excellent that we've been able to make sure that no one's time was wasted.
I agree. And you emphasize the power of trust and loyalty in brand building, which
Mm,
is obviously a very close subject to my heart as a marketer. Been done
mm.
that several times. Um, in your experience, what are the common mistakes businesses make that damage trust with customers, and how can they avoid them? I mean, if I would ask you if there is one thing that you find repetitive, or even three things that you find repetitive or very common in that sense.
I think the first thing that erodes trust is saying you're one thing and being something else. So in the sense of, I tend to get especially bigger businesses will come to me and say, our customers have all these expectations and we can't deliver on everything. And then we get complaints because they, think they should have all this and they're so entitled. And so, in my experience, it's not necessarily that the customer is entitled, it's that the customer, the human, has had many, many human experiences. And let's go back to the home builder. Actually, no, I'll tell you about a nutrition retailer that I was doing some work with. And the nutrition retailer kept getting customers who expected, instant results, or they expected free samples, or they expected that the team members working in the retail store would have all the nutritional and all the answers to the nutritional questions that the customers might have. And so the organization was saying to me, they have all these crazy expectations. And I had to kind of sit back and take in some information. I would say observation and collecting the right type of data also really helps you with this type of stuff as well. But sit back and really ask some really good questions around, well, why do they have these expectations? And what I learned, and this is not the first time it's happened, it happens quite consistently, is that being a human, you are exposed to, I couldn't even tell you how many pieces of information every single day, and absorbing, things that are factual, incorrect, fake news, whatever it is. But the reality is, you have all of this stuff coming at you. And then when you have this need, say, for example, you want to use the products that were sold at this nutrition um, shop, you also have this probably innate kind of expectation that they have all the answers to your questions as well. It becomes this expectation that this is a one stop shop. And so I had to say to the company, well, okay, so if you're not a one stop shop, what can we do about resetting the customer's expectations and helping them really clearly identify what your business is and what it is not? Because that was part of the problem. Their marketing and their content that they were putting out and the way they spoke to customers over the phone and invited them into the store, they positioned themselves as experts. But therefore, they're kind of, promising everything and delivering only one thing. And so it was really no great shock that the customers were getting upset when they weren't having their expectations met. And so that would be one of my first kind of things for bigger businesses, especially, or just any business really. Really strip back and think about what you are and what you are not, and help the customer really clearly identify, how you service them, how you come to market. And the beautiful thing was that it really did also show the opportunity for collaborations, the opportunity for partnerships, and those can make your brand even more trustworthy. Because I use the example with a lot of customers that when I used to work at Bunnings, which is, think like the Home Depot of Australia. I used to work in the paint department, and I would say to a customer, for example, this isn't the paint that you want for the job that you're doing, but I'm going to ring John at the Dulux Trade Centre 2 kilometres down the road, and I know he's got the paint for you. I'll get him to put it aside for you, and that is the product that's going to give you the best result. And people would say to me, why would you do that? You have lost the sale. And I would say to them, and whether it was the customer or the team members that I worked with, I might have lost the sale, but I gained the trust.
Wow.
And so that customer implicitly understood what we were there for. And what we were there for was not to sell them paint. We were there to make sure that they got the best result,
I'm sold on that. Wow. I
right?
love that. Yes, yes, absolutely. So you put your, well, you put the customer in front of your needs and in front of your
Exactly.
sale. And this is just, this is remarkable. And I think we all have something to learn from it. Even the experts who listen to this very particular episode. um, I love that. I love that approach. And it's not just true for business. We should also adopt to such things in life. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's something. You just gave an example that you're very familiar with, but for me, I'm like, I'm still wowed by the fact that you literally did that, and I'm sure you've done it more than once.
Oh,
uh,
many, many
well,
times. And this was the interesting thing. I actually had other managers come to me and say, "Hey, we heard you did this." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we do here." And they said, "But, that's hundreds of dollars not in our pocket." And I said, "But you watch, and this literally 100% of the time, the customers would come back and they would show me the photos of the job that they'd done. They would be so proud. They would be so grateful. They would leave reviews for the business. And then they'd come back and they'd complete more decorating jobs. And then they would come back and they would kit out their, outdoor living area. So we didn't lose them as a customer because we helped them gain trust that we're here for them and not the money. Like the
and I
money
love that.
comes when
Love
you
that it's
look after the human.
I love that it's not measurable. I mean, you created so many other effects in terms of word of mouth, in terms of social proofing, in
Mm.
terms of, there are so many things that you've managed to create within this one big trusted customer. I love that.
Yeah, it
Um,
makes all the difference.
I couldn't agree more. And you've coined the term CEHX proliferator. Could you tell us could you tell us what that means and how you help companies embrace this holistic approach to customer, employee, and human experience?
Yeah, so proliferator is essentially just another word for person that shouts things constantly. And I'm consistently and constantly proliferating the term CEHX, or the joy of sex. And the reason I call it the joy of sex, again, being controversial, but also I didn't make up the pronunciation. It was already there. I just added the human, which, blow me down, no one had already done. And it really became this opportunity to continue the conversation, or not even continue, kick off the conversation. These days it's a continuum, but initially it was a kicking off of the conversation. Everyone would say, "What's the H?" Because everyone already understood the C and the E and the X. They already knew that meant customer employee experience. But when I added the H into it, they were like, "What are you doing? Is this?" I had people asking, "Do you mean checks?" And I'm like, "No, I mean sex." And they were like, "I don't understand." I said, "It's adding the human back into this equation of business, of, you know, um, putting them in the middle of everything that we do, because the human component is your employee, it is your customer." And I talk about the fact that customers might come in after, or during the course of a bad day, and it's often I have often been the target of a customer's bad day. And it's really difficult in that position. And I can imagine, even more so, not imagine, I'm aware that even more so for your target audience, for example, in support centers, being at the brunt of somebody's bad day is a horrible employee experience. And so the reality is that it's not it's not good enough anymore just to expect your employee to soldier on. And it's not to say that everyone is now also allowed to be, falling to pieces at somebody raising their voice. There does need to be a level of resilience through the individual and through the team. But the reality is that when we think about the customer and the employee experience being a human experience, we start to really comprehend that that human experience comes with bad days. That human experience comes with confusion and frustration and, running late for work, or the kids wouldn't put their shoes on, or, this is one more thing to do on a mental load that's about to explode. And, at no point is it fair to be at the brunt or to wear the brunt of that. But when we can think about the human experience with empathy, it starts to help us reframe how we respond versus react to those experiences. And so, from a team point of view, it helps us to go, okay, you know what, I can absolutely empathize that this person is at their wits' end, and with safe boundaries and whatnot, help them. Obviously, if they're being abused, then that's a completely different scenario. But at the same time, from a customer, uh, being, the customer is a human as well, and everyone needs to really kind of step back and ascertain, what am I going to do in the situation, good, bad, or indifferent, right? How will we talk about response, especially in therapy, we talk about how will you respond versus react. And response is a really, like, naturally we want to react to everything, whether it's good, excited, elated, or bad. We want to, yell, get aggressive, whatever the case might be. They're all human reactions and responses,
I
but
guess
really kind of,
it's how you learn to put the urge aside, you know.
yeah, and tapering those emotions to understand, is that the right emotion to put out right now, or is that a get off the phone and take some deep breaths and, talk to my talk to my leader about how we might do that differently next time? Or is that, so really kind of understanding that people are people, and it's not an excuse for poor behavior, but it is something to comprehend and understand what that means for everybody in the experience that they live.
Yeah. And you know, to our bonus question of the day, for businesses that are just starting to focus on CEHX, what's one small but impactful step they can take to start building stronger relationship with their customers and employees right now?
That's such a great question. Look, the thing with customer experience and employee experience is this subdued belief that it all costs money. And the reality is that you can do so many things in and around improving and having a positively impactful customer and employee experience that creates value for your team and therefore for your customers. Because if your team hate their job, guess who knows? The customer instantly. If the team hate what they're doing, they literally will shoot off 1,000 million vibrations, and everybody they come in contact with will know. And so the best thing I would say is to really kind of find out on a human level what brings your team to do the job they do. And in some cases, it might be that, they have a feeling or value around doing something bigger than themselves, right? Having a bigger purpose. So, how is it that you might be able to provide for them a deeper purpose for the role that they're doing? In other people, it really is a human centered focus. Not everyone is the same, but a really common perception is that, if you're in, say, for example, this age group, and let's say Gen Alpha versus I'm a millennial, for example, that they want different things. But the reality is, what they value is generally the same, right? They value things like time for themselves, flexibility, they value good leadership, they value, so their ages and their experiences in life might be different, but their values tend to be quite similar. So, as an employee experience, how can you deliver to the things and areas in life that those people have shared values around, right? Great start. Awesome way to become what I call a destination employer, right? Save money on recruitment, save money on turnover, reduce churn, figure out what your team value and apply tactics around that. And the same thing would be said for the customers, but in the also additional sense of remove friction for customers. Customers have a job that they need to get done, and the best thing you can do for them is help them make that job as friction free as possible,
I
right?
love that.
The easier you make their life, the happier and more value adding you become in their life.
I love that. And I love how you talked about the different generations because we're always constantly seeing generational changes in everything that we do in our workplace and customer service and so many different types of things in life and in business. And I think it's super crucial to understand that eventually we all care about the same things, just in different ways.
Correct.
Um, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was a huge pleasure having you here with us. For our listeners who would like to get more of that CX juice and follow Aileen on her LinkedIn profile, this episode's going to be live on our social media and as usual on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Aileen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been an absolute pleasure.